just a letter?
It's mine.
Is it?
No, I would.
I don't think so. I mean, it's actually, I think, is that anybody? It's the one, the horns. So if you got a 0 on it, and you're sure, here, everybody who turned one in, of course, got credit. This is how actually it worked out. No one picked the Senator Horn, which is, incidentally, a critically endangered species. Lives in the Sahara. There's not a lot known about it because it was thought to be extinct in the wild for a long time. It's been sort of rediscovered and it's trying to be reintroduced. It lives in like Chad and Niger. Just for your own. Well, people hunt. Yeah. But it's just, but anyway, probably never very real common because it lives in the Sahara Desert.
Do people hunt antelopes?
Sure.
For meat?
Yeah. There's a lot of meat in an antelope. It's like, do they hunt deer in Texas? Anyway, if this applies to you or you hear about it from somebody, let me know. So, last time we kind of left off here, we were talking about, well, what did we talk about? We talked about sort of competition, talked a lot about competition within a sex for access to the opposite sex, mostly male-male competition for access to females, and all of the sort of issues that arise out of that intra-sexual selection. And we started on inferred sexual selection, where one member of one sex is choosing to mate with somebody from other sex, and it's usually females choosing to mate with males. And we talked about the ways in which females might obtain direct benefits by mating with males that provide resources or important habitats or something like that. And then we were left with this, which is there's a lot of seriousness on the part of females choosing to mate with males of differing kinds, but they're mating with males that have, I don't know, longer eyes or funny waddles or, long tails or really bizarre plumage in birds of paradise. The males are really trying to attract females, and the females are really interested in judging males, but what in the world do the females get out of this? And we're entering into the realm of what is referred to as indirect benefits rather than direct benefits. We're gonna look at a few cases of this because I just like to. Of course, the thing that is the, iconic example of this are peacocks. Wait a second. What are you doing? Turning sound. No sound here. We got not much sound here. We'll need sound because apparently these are accompanied by classical music and flamenco music and those sorts of things. So we have to hear that. Lots of percussion. Obviously tail. Play that again, just to see if it loads it better this time. Because it's accompanied not only by just the display of the large tail, but there's also dances, and there's calls, the male peacock to attack TN. What is the deal there? Temminck's Tragapan.
Another pheasant, Temminck's Tragapan. His costume jewelry is even more elaborate. And if you've got it, why not flaunt it? This is the Bulwer's pheasant, and he has got spectacular wattles. He's impressive enough when he's going about his normal business, but when she is around, he gets very excited indeed. Impressive though he is, she is very critical. It's not good enough, it seems.
He doesn't strut around the way peacocks would attract fans. Amazing, huh?
Where are these from?
These are, I'm going to say, Southern Asia.
The Ardis pheasant has the largest of all tail feathers, and wing feathers that are certainly spectacular.
And final. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah.
The national bird of Australia. This appetite of females for increasingly dramatic spectacles that has forced the males to dance to their tune in ever more extreme ways.
There's at least some truth to that last statement here. So, I mean, females are choosing to mate with males that have ever more extreme displays, but, who cares that somebody has a really long tail or big flanges or these bizarre images for birds of paradise? I mean, yeah, females are choosing to mate with males that have these traits, but why would females do this? What's the point here? Okay. What we're going to do is talk through the sort of understanding for how these sorts of extreme sort of mating signals come to be. Now, this is a really complicated process. It involves male behavior, all of this display behavior. It involves the male, changes in the male's appearance, okay, and his behavior. And it involves female behavior, the choice of male. So we're going to actually look at this as we have done before, as sort of evolutionarily stable strategy approach. We're not going to work through any of the math of this because the math is super difficult for anybody to figure out. This is really sort of high-powered, sort of evolutionary ecology here. But we want to sort of like reason through the sort of, what's happening here. And we're going to start with understanding that there are two kinds of strategies. One will be a male strategy, and one will be a female strategy. Okay? And we're going to take a look at a couple of characteristics that we may want to that we're going to incorporate into our sort of mechanism for producing these sort of extreme mating signals. The first thing that we're going to start with is, let's suppose that some males are high quality and some males are low quality, and females want to assess that difference. They're low quality males, and females don't want to mate with low quality males. And they're high quality males, and they would prefer to mate with higher quality males. And there's, males are, continuously distributed here from very low to medium sized to relatively high to the highest quality males. So it's a continuous distribution of male quality. Okay. Secondly, there is a continuous distribution of some measure of the courtship display. It could be, the length of the peacock tail, or the vigor of the way that they, fan their wings, or something like that, or the color of the patches of feathers that they might have. Some measure of size of this display, or the amount of investment that they place in this, or the vigor with which they perform things. And some of them have very low, maybe no display. Some of them have intermediate levels, and some have a very high level of display. You can think of this as just, the size of the display, although understanding that it might be color intensity, or the vigor of the dancing, or something like that. Okay. And we're going to say that this may or may not cost something. It costs more, potentially, to produce a very long peacock tail than a very short one. Or it costs more to invest a lot of effort in dancing than it does to invest little effort. Or it costs more to produce a very intense color pattern than a pale color pattern. Something like that. Okay. Now at this point, just sort of we'll stop and just say here that males here might very well differ in fitness due to a couple of different things that we see right here. The first is low quality to high quality. Those males that are high quality and that could be in some sort of, in all sorts of possible ways. Maybe they're good at avoiding predators, or they're good at finding food, or they're good at defending themselves from something else. They have a good immune system, good at avoiding diseases. And those that are better at this have higher fitness. Those that have higher quality have higher, reproductive payoff somehow. The second portion of this is that if this is costly, and we're not saying that it has to be, but if it's costly, those that expend more energy in producing, a long peacock tail, don't have as much energy to do other things like grow fast, or invest in, other, attributes of body parts. And it may cost them in terms of things like, it's easy to catch a peacock that has a very long tail if you're a predator, maybe, and it's harder to catch one that has a very short tail. So male fitness is going to be influenced by at least these two characteristics here. So we'll keep that in mind. We'll return to this. So now, here we have the male strategy. Male strategies differ in the extent to which these two traits, 1 and 2 there, correlate with one another. Okay. Low quality to high quality, low display to high level of display. It may be, and we're going to say that it starts out this way, maybe there's no correlation between those two at all. High quality males may have, all sorts of levels of display, or low quality males may have all sorts of levels of display. There's no correlation. Okay, some of them might have a modest amount of correlation, meaning that those that tend to have, a bigger display tend to be higher quality. And then we also have male strategy where there's a very high correlation of display and quality. Those that have high quality have high display quantities. Okay. And the difference between males is this strategy where there's differences in the correlation between sort of traits 1 and 2. Fair enough? So that's sort of male perspective. Female perspective, and this is the female strategy here, is number 3 here, which is females differ in the extent that they interpret differences in display as differences in quality. Now, what does that mean? It means that if a female, we're thinking of this as sort of in some sense, the goal, what we're sort of interested in finding out. Females are interested in mating with males that have high quality. What do they pay attention to? They may ignore those differences in the display intensity. Males are displaying all sorts of ways. Some of them are displaying a small amount, some are displaying little. Females don't pay any attention, don't care. Couldn't be quality. On the other hand, there are, at the other extreme, are females that closely attend to the differences in display. Okay? They're not, not necessarily picking out the best males, because that depends on the male strategy. If the males are correlated, if there's a correlation between their display and their quality, then she's doing fine. Because when she pays attention to that display, she's picking out males that have high quality. But if the males are not doing that, if in the male strategy there's no correlation between what the males do and what their quality is, then she won't be so fine. She's just getting a random male. Okay. This is the third thing that influences male fitness here. If she's going to pay, attention, it's going to be depending upon the female's choice of males. The female's choice of the males that she meets with. That obviously is central to whether or not the males have increased fitness. Okay, so we have males that differ in quality that will influence their fitness. Males that invest different amounts in, expend different amounts in producing a display, that will affect the male's fitness. And whether or not a female will choose to mate with a male affects the male's fitness. Okay? Does that make some sense? I mean, you understand this is all the setup here. Yeah.
The last point, is that about female choosing?
It is, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that, yes. But regardless of whether they're choosing good males or bad males, still, if we choose a male, that male has higher fitness, even if he's a bad male. Okay. So that will affect his fitness. Okay. Whatever bad male means, good male. Okay. So what we're interested in doing is taking a look at how the male strategy, which is, as you remember, whether or not there's the extent of the correlation between the amount of the display and his quality. That's the male strategy. It can go from low to high. And the female strategy, which is the degree of attention that she pays to the display signal, which is, low or none, all the way up to high. Okay. These are, we have evolutionary changes that are happening to male strategies. Their correlation here, so, display and quality. And the female strategy, which is co-evolving at the same time that the male strategy is evolving, which is how much attention she pays to that display signal. Okay. And it turns out that there are two possible ESSs, two possible evolutionarily stable strategies, two combinations of traits that the males and females settle in upon. Okay, the first one is that males have no correlation of display and quality, so they end up down here, and the females pay no attention to the male signals. You end up down in this region. Okay? And that's possible. I mean, it's entirely possible, evolutionarily stable outcome that males don't provide much information about quality in their display size, and females pay little attention to it. Okay. Or the males have a high correlation between quality and display, and females pay close attention to those male signals. And this is the place we want to end up at, where males have high correlation between the signal that they're giving and their quality. And remember, that's what we're interested in the females. The females are interested in trying to assess. And females pay close attention to those signals. You can end up then with, males producing extravagant signals that indicate high quality, and females paying close attention to those characteristics in order to mate with males that have high quality. Okay? You can only end up here. I mean, you can't end up there with just any set of circumstances. You have to have certain conditions occur in order to end up in this region, sort of high and high. Okay. Remember, male fitness depends on these three traits: intrinsic male quality, the costliness of the display, and the female's choice of males. Okay. And those things actually come into the preconditions that are required for this particular ESS to be favored. Okay. Let's look at it this way. These are the three conditions here that are required. The first is that, well, there are differences between high and low quality males. Okay, so this is graph. This is the male display investment. So if we just think of it from peacock terms, which is always easy, short tails to long tails or something like that. And this is the male fitness other than mating success. So we're not interested in mating success here. We're interested in the fitness of the males for things like avoiding predators, finding food, or growing fast or something like that. Okay, fitness that's apart from mating success. That there are high and low quality males, okay, and the greater the investment in a signal, the lower their fitness is in other contexts except mating. Okay, so the longer the tail of the peacock, the less able it is to find food or maybe avoid predators or something like that. Okay? That it costs them something in terms of investing more in greater and greater amounts of display. So this is something that's called costly. It's a costly signal. Okay. But low quality males are affected more by this than high quality males are. Costs them both. But low quality males suffer a greater decline here as they invest more and more in this display, this, I don't know, peacock field. Okay? So those are two of the characteristics. One is it has to be costly, the display trait, because the more you invest in it, the more it costs you in terms of other fitness. And number two, it has to affect the lower quality males more than it affects the high quality males. Second thing is this, shown in this graph, which is that we're looking at the female's perceived quality of the male, you know, the males that she's choosing, as a function, you know, increases male mating success. So the greater attention she pays to, I don't know, the length of the tail, okay, the greater the success of the mating success of those males. Okay, those are the three characteristics that you have to have. And they're kind of influencing those three parts of male fitness. You know, just intrinsic differences in quality, the fact that you invest, you know, as you invest more, it costs you something. And the fact that if females are choosing these males with these high display traits, that increases their reproductive success. Okay, let's see how this kind of might work in one kind of set of traits. On the x-axis, we're looking at male trait investment level. You know, the strength of their, you know, the vigor of their display, the length of their tail, or whatever it is from low to high. And we're graphing on the same sort of axis the fecundity of the males due to the fact that the females are mating, okay, which is increasing. Okay. And we're looking at male survival. Yeah.
What does fecundity mean?
The number of babies they have, number of offspring. And survival. And it starts at high when there's not much of an investment in that trait. Okay, but there are differences among males, and the highest quality males don't decline as much as the medium quality males, or certainly as much as the low quality males as they invest more and more in that particular trait. Okay? That makes sense to folks? Now, what this is showing is some sort of a, I don't know, critical survival threshold. Males are willing to drop their survival down to some level. I don't know, 80% of the total, you know. And they're not willing to go down to 20%. Okay, they're just some sort of minimum survival that they're willing to accept and not go below that. And if you do that, that means that what you're doing is asking where along these curves pass through this critical survival point. For the best males, it passes through right here. the second, medium males, it passes through here, and the worst males, it passes through there. There's differing investment levels depending on the sort of intrinsic quality of those males, even though their survival is dropping off as a function of the fact that they invest more and more in this display trait. That means that they're gonna, if they have this investment level, which is more than this one, they will have a higher fecundity than the medium males and the low quality males. Which is kind of what we're getting at. Those males that have better males will be able to invest relatively more in this display trait, which will then attract more females because they're higher quality and they can tolerate a greater reduction in their survival without, completely getting rid of investment in those displays. Okay. Does that make some sense? That's kind of what we're trying to do. So, here are the three things that are required. The trait must be costly. It has to decline here as the investment in that display increases. Okay. Costs differentially affect the high and low quality males. Okay. And male mating success increases with the female's perception of that trait. Okay. We're going to talk about those three factors the rest of the time and maybe into next time. Okay. We're not going to talk about them in exactly that order. First question I'm going to ask is, are females choosy? Do they choose to mate with males differently on the basis of, this display investment? So that's point 3 here. So we're going to do point 3 first. The second part is we're going to ask, are the traits costly? Which obviously I think is number 1 here. Okay. And then we're going to ask the question, does the display intensity, whatever that is, the tail length or color of the image or behavior that they exhibit during display, does that actually indicate male quality? Not the attractiveness of the males, not the mating part, but does it indicate that they're better in terms of the kinds of traits that don't have to do with mating? Survival, avoiding predators, avoiding diseases, and so on. So we have choosy females, we have costly traits, and this is a thing that is sometimes referred to as, does the display honestly signal quality? It's an honest signal. Okay, so we'll sometimes see that sort of way that it's presented. So, that's number 2. Make sense? So that's where we're going to go. So our females choosy, and this is actually, it's kind of the easiest thing to study. Maybe that's not, I don't know, put it quite that way, but it's something that has been studied hundreds of times. There's a lot of data that bears on this subject. And let's take a look at some of those examples. Okay, so are females choosy based on particular display traits? So this is a turkey. Here's a couple of real turkeys. And they have a variety of sexually dimorphic traits. Males are different from females. Males are bigger. They have spurs on their legs that are used when they fight with one another. So they jab these spurs into the opponents. Can't see those on this computer. But they also have various sort of soft body parts here, exposed skin. They have, bare patches of skin on their head, the skull cap. They have these things here, which are called the carbuncles. Front caruncles and side caruncles. This is a beard, which is a wattle. In Turkey, they call them beards. They have this sort of thing here, which is called the snood, which is a bizarre word, but that's something that actually turns out to be really important here in what females like. It's a dangly thing here. And here's a long snood and here's a short snood. Okay. Females would prefer the guy with the long snood here. They measure it relaxed and stretched. Okay. And that turns out to be much more, they have longer snoods for those males that are solicited to mate by females. Also the skull cap, which is this bit up here. Okay. So there are traits that females choose over others. Yes?
This is kind of an irrelevant question, but because their skin is so exposed now, do they get skin cancer by chance?
I don't think that happens. They'll live for 10 years or something like that. It's probably not a lot, but, yeah. This is swordtail. Male, female, males have the swordtails. These are in the aquarium trade, so if you've ever had fish in your aquarium, then maybe you've had swordtails. Females prefer males with longer swords in their tails. And these sorts of experiments are done in the way that you would, way fish experiments are often done. You have like an aquarium, for example, that has divided into 3 parts with a, glass partition dividing it into thirds. Females put in the middle, and you put males on either side. And the male that the female prefers is the one that she spends the time associating with on, closer to that pane of glass, closer to that male. What we're looking here is at the difference in the sword length between males on the 2 different sides. So we have a small difference in sword length, and the females prefer the one that has the, whatever it is, 5 millimeter longer sword, because she spends an additional 150 seconds over in this trial on the longer sworded male compared to the shorter sworded male side. But that preference grows as you increase the difference in the sword length between the 2 sides of the aquarium. So she prefers even longer and longer males that have even longer and longer swords. Sword length. Here's a couple of birds called house finches. These are males. This is a male with a brilliant red plumage, and a male with basically no red plumage. It's just this sort of, it's sort of a yellowish feathers. Okay. And this would be called a dull male, and this is a bright male. And this is the extent to which females are sexually attracted to males of different plumage sizes. So females will come up and raise their tail if they're interested in mating with a male. So this is the measure of that stimulus level. And males of brighter plumage are more attractive to females. Females want to mate with those males. Okay? Make sense? Take our sort of iconic, yeah.
For the plumage example, is it energetically costing the case, or is this an intrinsic trait?
We will actually spend some time talking about that. About half an hour, something like that. It's an interesting question. Let's go to peacocks. So peacocks, the males, I guess that is redundant, peacocks go around and they set up a territory, a small territory that they defend and where they display to females. Okay? And females come into their territory and they mate with those males or not, and that's basically the last the male ever sees of the female or his offspring. So he does not participate in any way in parental care. Okay. And this is the likelihood that he acquires a display site, which he either might not or he might. So it's really sort of like only two things that you can do to have a territory or you don't. Okay, and this is as a function of kind of the length of the trach, the length of the tail in the peacock. Okay. The number of copulations, so this is, successful mating, where they actually mated the male, is a function of the eye spots in the train. It's not a real strong function, but it does have a relationship to the number, the more eye spots that a peacock has, the greater the likelihood that he will mate. So let's take a look at peacock tails. They're big. They have these big eye spots, okay, which are the sort of iconic part of the peacock's tail. But there are other feathers that don't have eye spots. There are these guys out here on the end, which have this little kind of shape here. These are called the fishtails. There are other spots that are down here along the edge that are, again, different in their shape. They're not the big round eye spots. Okay. This is kind of how those eye spots are arranged. So you have the major eye spots, and when you look at it, they're not just randomly assorted onto the tail, they're actually in a semicircle. You can sort of see that over here. Here's these spots are arranged in a sort of semicircle around the body of the male. Okay. Major eye spots. The fishtails are out here on the edge. There are these minor eye spots, which are those things down on the bottom that have a little eye spot that's sort of asymmetrical. The whole feather is asymmetrical. And then they have swords, which are things down here again at the bottom of the tail that don't have eye spots on them at all. Okay. It turns out, though, that it's the major eye spots that are really the important thing. Here we've got a peacock where you put a white spot over the location of all the major eye spots, just to sort of visualize it. Okay. And then the experimental peacocks, they remove some spots here around the outside. Okay, they're not removing all of them. They're removing something like 10% or something like that of the spots. Okay, so you just, you go in and clip them out. Okay, it changes the display, if you're paying attention to the major eye spots, from this to this. Okay. What effect does that have on the attractiveness of those males to females? Okay. Control birds have a sort of median level of copulations per hour here. It's quite variable. And when they remove a certain fraction of those eye spots, the median copulation level goes down. So they're not as likely to mate with females. Okay. And that's in the experimental birds. If you look at what happens in sort of natural birds, often these are in like big parks and so on, so they're kind of there's a relationship between the number of eye spots that they display, so this would be lower and this is higher, eye spots that they display, and the number of copulations they have lower than about this number. They have fewer copulations, and when they have more eye spots, there's a greater number of copulations. Some males are still not very successful, okay? But some males are very successful. So, females females are often choosing males on the basis of those display traits that we kind of look at. So if we're thinking back to that first picture, you know, males that have, you know, those long tails, or in the case of birds that have just single long tails, or big displays, and peacocks with the wide flanges, and the orangutans, they're mating more likely with those males that have these extreme display traits than the males that don't. Okay, what about costliness? That's the second thing we have to take a look at. Yes?
So in this previous slide, the top graph showed the control is with the eye spots covered?
No, the control is
No, no eye spots covered.
correct.
Okay.
And the experimental is not, nobody's covering eye spots, they're cutting them out. Okay? What about costliness? The second thing we need to wonder about is whether or not a male that has a greater expression of a display trait is paying some sort of cost. So here we got a couple pictures of jungle fowl. Jungle fowl are, I don't know, they're the ancestor from which all chickens have been selected. Beautiful birds. See how sort of extravagantly colorful these birds are. This one doesn't probably have quite as much of a tail, but it turns out that the thing that matters a lot to jungle fowl is the size of the comb. Okay, this one has a kind of a very small comb, whereas this bird has a very big comb on its head. Now it turns out that if you look at the sort of, you take blood samples from birds that have different comb sizes, those that have the longest combs have the fewest lymphocytes. Those that have shorter combs actually have a higher lymphocyte count. These are white blood cells, involved in immunity. The bigger the comb, the lower their white blood cell count is, the lower their ability to resist infections. Now, this may not come as a surprise because the reason that some birds develop big combs and other birds develop small combs has to do with the effect that testosterone is having on the development of these secondary sexual characteristics. The greater the testosterone level in these birds, the bigger their comb. The greater the testosterone level, the greater the expression of often secondary sexual characteristics in males. But testosterone is not a good drug, okay, because the more the testosterone you have, the lower the lymphocyte count, usually. Greater amounts of testosterone suppress immune function. And, you combine, greater testosterone with comb length and greater testosterone with lower lymphocyte count means that you end up with this. The greater the comb length, the lower the lymphocyte count. Yeah.
Is this still related to reproductive success?
Well, it would be related to reproductive success because this is something that is affecting the fitness of the males apart from their ability to mate. Okay? We're not linking this directly to survival from diseases, but we're linking it to sort of ability to resist disease, ability to resist infections. So this guy might be the male that is chosen by females. He's also the male that has kind of bad lymphocyte numbers and might be susceptible to diseases. He's paying a price. thing in peacocks. The greater the number of eye spots taking blood samples again from peacocks. The fewer heterophils, again, blood cells, that they have, circulating. So these are things that are involved in phagocytosis and commonly involved in resisting bacterial infections. So those with bigger tails probably have a lower ability to resist bacterial infections. It doesn't always have to be immune function. I mean, it just gave 2 examples of it. It doesn't always have to be that. It could be energetic. So here's a sword-tailed male and female, and the idea here is that those males that are carrying around this sword, swimming, probably have to expend more energy doing that than males that don't have a long sword. So here we've got males, either by themselves or with a female, and looking at the oxygen consumption in comparison to males who've had their swords surgically removed, either by themselves or the female present. And when there's no female present, they have to expend more energy in swimming around than when there's a female, than males with the sword. So the swords are costly in terms of energetics. Put a female in there, it gets even worse, I guess, because now the male increases his activity, increases his metabolic rate, and so does the male without the sword, but there's this big difference between the metabolic rate of males with swords and males without swords. So the energetic costs. Here's an example, another example. It might be energetics. It could be just the sort of overall ability to use stored resources and so on. So let's take a look at these birds, which are called widow birds. I'll show you a clip here.
The costume put on especially for courtship dances by the African widow bird may not be quite as extravagant and unwieldy as the others. But the widow bird displays by flying with his. But the widow bird displays by flying with his. It's a hazardous business, exposing yourself like this, even if you can fly. You're making yourself an easy target for a hawk, and there are many around on these grasslands in Kenya. Evidently, the additional matings the male gets from displaying in this dangerous fashion make the risk worthwhile.
That's the hypothesis. These are data from an experiment that involves not quite the same species of widow bird. That one was like, I don't know, it's the red-winged or red-shouldered or something. That widow bird. This is the red. What's it called? Like this red collar widow bird or something like that. But they're very close to one another. The idea here for these widow birds is that they breed over a fairly long period of time, 3 months or something like that. And when they're doing that, they're holding territories and courting females and defending against males and things like that. Okay, so these are 2 groups of widow birds. There are what are called control males, and for those males, what they do is they capture those males, okay, and they actually cut the last like 2 centimeters off of their tail, so a little bit here. So they're experimentally manipulated, and they've reduced their tail length to what is the average in the population. So they're not like weirdly long or short. Okay. And then there are the short-tailed males, where they take off about 10 centimeters of the tail, okay? And that reduces the tail size to about the shortest group of naturally occurring widow birds. It doesn't make them like tailless, but it reduces the length of their tail to sort of natural range, okay? And then they look at the body condition index of males over the course of the time when they're defending those territories. And with birds, you can, I've talked about this before, but you can capture them and you turn them upside down and blow on them and you can see how much stored fat there is that they have by just looking at by just observing the fat under their skin, which is translucent. Okay? So you can judge kind of what condition they're in just by capturing and looking at them. The control-tailed males lose body condition much more quickly than the short-tailed males. Males with shorter, but not dramatically shorter tails than the control males are not paying as much of a cost to carrying around that tail 10 centimeters less. This one's 2 centimeters less. Not paying as much of a cost carrying around a longer tail as the short-tailed males would. Does that make some sense? So here it's a cost that is probably in terms of stored fat reserves, but that probably then correlates with their capacity to run quickly or fly away quickly if there's predators or chase females, and their body condition just declines over the course of the days. It's worse at day 40, it's worse at day 60, it's worse at day 80. Makes some sense? These are costly traits. Okay? So, what about quality? So the last thing the last condition that's necessary for there to be this ESS that links male strategies to female strategies. Okay, this is a blue grosbeak. Obviously, it's blue grosbeak. It turns out in other studies, the thing that the females are paying the most attention to is the blueness of the rump. Okay, as opposed to head or something like that. That's the thing that most determines female mate choice. Okay. The blueness on the rump correlates with the tail feather growth rates. Now, what is that saying? It's saying that this is not something that females are they're not necessarily interested in male tail feather growth rate, but birds, molt, they have to replace their feathers annually. The faster that they can do that, the better off they are. They can then, go out and forage. They can get away from mates. They are higher quality if they can replace those tail feathers more quickly than if it takes them a long time to replace those tail feathers. And that correlates with how blue they are. It's an indicator of quality. Here's another example that kind of goes after disease a little bit. This is a thing called the greenfinch. They have a series of patches of yellow that are kind of important in terms of whether or not females like them. Okay. And that's what we're looking at here is the plumage brightness, which is sort of, in this case, it's a statistical measure of how bright it is over a bunch of different characteristics. Brighter birds, less bright birds. And prefer versus those that they don't prefer. Okay,
Which
and
one? Prefer which one over which one?
the bright ones. One of the builder ones. In this experiment, what they did was they gave all of the birds, the males, an injection of a kind of a virus that actually causes a little bit of a disease response, but nothing sort of fatal to the birds. And then the next day, they take another blood sample and they measure the number of virus particles in the blood sample. Okay, so they can measure the virus clearance rate, the number of virus particles you put in, the number of virus particles that remain after a certain time. Okay. The clearance rate is higher for those birds that have a higher plumage brightness. Okay, those birds that are more brightly colored actually have the capacity to remove viruses from their blood more completely. And they have lower viremia. So the birds will develop a little, probably, swelling and sore part near the site of injection, which is lower for those birds that have higher plumage brightness. Those birds that are brighter plumage are not suffering the disease. They're getting rid of the virus more quickly. Yes. That's the sort of like the disease consequence of having the virus injected into you. In this case, it's probably a sort of swelling and discomfort at the site of injection. In this case, makes sense. So they're higher quality. Back to peacocks again. Area of eye spots and, what? Tail growth rates are kind of an indirect indication of whether or not a male is high quality. Virus clearing rates are kind of an indirect indication of whether whether that has a great effect on that quality. This is probably a direct measure of the effect that they're having on the quality of their offspring. This is the percentage of offspring that are surviving after 2 years. Okay, now, remember, peacocks pay no attention to their offspring at all. They have no contact with mom after mating. Okay, and so all of this has to do with any difference that is due to the fathers has to do with whatever it is that the fathers are donating to those offspring genes, basically, because he's doing no parental care. Okay. There's not a lot of data here, but these are the data we had. Those that have higher, bigger eye spot area have greater survival of young than those that have smaller eye spot area. So males with greater displays are probably intrinsically, genetically, of higher quality. And why does that matter? Of course, it's because if a female's going to mate with a male to get some sort of benefit, if you're a peahen mating with a peacock, the only benefit that you're not going to get any sort of direct benefits. The only benefits are these indirect benefits from males that have higher quality. How do you tell that? Well, you mate with the males that have longer tails because that tail length is an honest indicator of male quality. Okay, we're getting back to your question over here about the colors of those house finches. The reason that they have bright red plumage is due to the fact that they have consumed more food that contains carotenoid pigments than this guy did. oranges and yellows are mostly carotenoid pigments. They don't always have to be, but a lot of them are carotenoid pigments. And carotenoids are things that can't be produced by animals. Animals don't have the biochemical machinery, the metabolic machinery, to produce carotenoid pigments. They can only get these red pigments from their diet. Plants produce carotenoids, and if you eat, certain plant foods, you are obtaining a lot of carotenoids. And that's why you have, when you're in a zoo, sometimes the flamingos, they start out really pink and then they fade and get white, unless they're fed with food that provides carotenoids, which then they can incorporate into their developing feathers and turn pink. Yeah. Okay. That's where it comes from. Around here, spoonbills are pink because they're eating carotenoids. Those red pigments that are in male guppies are a consequence of carotenoids that the guppies have eaten. And when females are choosing to mate with males that are brightly colored in the house finch or in guppies, brightly red, they're choosing to mate with males that have been successful at what? Finding food. Okay, so that's why it's thought to be, the thinking is that the prevalence of selection for individuals who are bright red has a lot to do with selection for males who are really good at finding food. Let's take a look at this guy. These are house finches.
Male house finches are colored red by chemicals in the fruit and seeds they eat.
Carotenoids.
This female wants a male that's good at finding food. Red feathers suggest just that, while pale feathers could be due to poor foraging. Bright males are advertising their feeding skills. They're the ones that she'll prefer as a partner. In the weeks to come, the bright males that are good providers will be good fathers.
This would be a direct benefit.
But that's not the whole story. By choosing a bright male, the female is also choosing a healthy partner. Bright males have very few fleas and lice among their feathers. Duller males often have more, which might infest the nest and chicks. The bright males are the best choice. They're well-fed and parasite-free, literally flushed with health.
House finches are from sort of the southwestern and southwestern part of the U.S. They were introduced into eastern North America, and they spread like wildfire across North America. They were incredibly abundant around here until about 25, 30 years ago. And there was a plague of extremely virulent conjunctivitis that passed through the house finch populations, say in the Houston area or all through the southeast. Killed like 95% of birds. So it's not like our pink eye, it's like a deadly pink eye. Okay. And there's a few left around still. And there was a big effect on the passage of that disease, that epidemic through the house finch population, had a big effect on the appearance of house finches in the area. Okay, so this is pre-epidemic and post-epidemic, some traits of the birds. Okay. They're a little smaller after the epidemic than before the epidemic. Not much and not significantly. What they really are is they got a lot redder. In this scale, the plumage color redness is a lower number, which I don't know, it's not helpful exactly, but this much lower number here means they're much redder than they were to start with. Those individuals who were very brightly colored red were more resistant to the passage of this particular disease. Okay? As a consequence, everybody left behind was redder. Okay? That red pigment, that the carotenoid pigment, indicated that they were much better at, they're going to be much better at resisting diseases. Not just in fighting food, but resisting disease. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Now, to your question precisely, that red pigment is something that you get from eating. You know, when you're good at eating, you're bad at eating, you might get more carotenoid pigments or fewer carotenoid pigments. But it doesn't really cost you a lot to incorporate those carotenoid pigments into your feathers. The cost of making the feather is making the feather. Okay? If you've got a lot of carotenoids, you can just deposit those carotenoids in the feather and it turns out to be red. If you don't have a lot of carotenoids, you just can't do that. This is a trait which is probably not so different in costliness. Those real pale males are probably not investing less in the production of those yellow feathers than the males that are bright red. And that changes a little bit about how we think about these things. These are traits that are sometimes called concealing indicators, revealing indicators. They reveal the internal state. You know, they reveal how much, say, carotenoids they have. So we have the males produce more or less the same investment level in yellow feathers or dull red feathers or bright red feathers. Yes.
I think I misheard you when you said after the plague they are brighter,
Right, brighter red.
but it's
The number is smaller.
it's a post-epidemic mean is 3.7.
Right, and
Whereas,
the lower numbers are redder.
oh.
That with a certain investment level in either yellow or red feathers, they're equally costly. Nevertheless, you know, those individuals that are poor quality make yellow feathers. Those make that are higher quality have a higher fecundity curve because they can make brighter red feathers. And there's some that have the highest fecundity of all because they can make the brightest red feathers because they have the most carotenoids available to them. Okay. And that causes them to have differing levels of success, even though the investment differences are not probably greater. These are, as I said, these are something that's called a revealing indicator, where the cost of producing the trait is more or less the same, but the intensity is different because the trait just reveals some inherent qualitative difference among males. Okay? Now all of this mating has happened. We're going to have to think about terms of, you know, raising offspring and so on, which we'll take up starting next time when we're thinking about mating systems. Yeah. And like I said, those people who didn't come in as early as others, I have one person who turned in their answer to